I spent years learning random celebrity voices for fun. It ended up saving my sister's life. Everyone thought I was wasting my time with the voice impressions, and honestly, I couldn't blame them, because what kind of 28-year-old man spends 6 hours a day practicing celebrity voices in his apartment while working a dead-end job at a call center? My name is Colin, and for the past 7 years, I've been obsessed with vocal mimicry, not just doing surface-level impressions, but actually studying the physiological mechanics of how different people produce sound, analyzing pitch patterns and resonance, and the subtle muscle movements that make each voice unique. It started as a party trick in college when I did a Morgan Freeman impression that made my roommate spit out his beer, and somehow it spiraled into this all-consuming hobby where I'd spend entire weekends watching interviews and movies, breaking down every vocal quirk and practicing until my throat was raw. My girlfriend left me over it 2 years ago, said I cared more about sounding like other people than being myself, and my parents kept hinting that maybe I should focus on my actual career instead of this weird obsession. But I couldn't stop, because there was something almost meditative about the process of deconstructing a voice and rebuilding it in my own throat. By 2023, I could do maybe 30 voices convincingly enough that people couldn't tell the difference in a phone call. Everyone from actors like Tom Hanks and Samuel Jackson to politicians like Obama and Trump, even some YouTube personalities and podcast hosts. My younger sister Tessa used to think it was cool when we were kids, would beg me to do different voices during car rides, but as we got older, she started making the same comments as everyone else about how I needed to grow up and focus on real skills. She was studying pre-med at Stanford, brilliant and driven and everything I wasn't, and family dinners became uncomfortable when my parents would praise her accomplishments and then ask me with forced optimism if anything interesting was happening with my hobby. The last time I'd seen Tessa was at Christmas 6 months ago, and we'd gotten into an argument about my life choices. She'd said that I was hiding behind other people's voices because I was too scared to figure out who I actually was. I'd gotten defensive, and we hadn't spoken much after that, just occasional texts and awkward phone calls. Then, on a Wednesday evening in June, I got a phone call from my mom, and I could tell immediately something was catastrophically wrong from the way her voice sounded. She told me that Tessa had been kidnapped from the Stanford campus, taken from the parking lot outside her dorm building around 8 at night, and the police had found her car with her phone and bag inside, but no signs of struggle. The next hours were a nightmare of police interviews and coordinating with my parents who lived 3 hours away in Sacramento. The police were treating it seriously, but they kept saying the first 24 hours were critical. She didn't have enemies though. She was universally liked, focused entirely on school and volunteer work. The detectives asked me when I'd last spoken to her, and I had to admit it had been 3 weeks ago, just a brief text exchange, and I felt this crushing guilt that we'd wasted 6 months being distant over a stupid argument. My parents arrived around midnight, and we spent the night in a hotel near campus, none of us sleeping, just staring at our phones and waiting for updates that never came. The ransom call finally came 36 hours after Tessa was taken. They played us the recording, and I felt my stomach drop listening to this distorted voice demanding $200,000 in cryptocurrency, threatening that if we contacted law enforcement, then Tessa would die. The police said the voice was being electronically modified, which made it impossible to identify gender or age. What struck me about the recording was how practiced it sounded, like whoever was speaking had rehearsed their lines, and there was something in the rhythm and pacing that felt familiar. My parents were devastated, already talking to their bank about liquidating retirement accounts. I felt completely useless, my stupid voice impressions hobby seeming more pointless than ever, but I couldn't stop replaying that ransom call in my head, and I asked the detective if I could listen to it again. He let me listen with headphones 3 times in a row while I focused entirely on the vocal patterns underneath the electronic distortion. The distortion was heavy, but not perfect. There were moments where the original voice bled through, and I started to pick up on specific phonetic patterns, the way certain consonants were formed, the slight lisp on S sounds, the particular rhythm of emphasis. All of it was familiar. On the 4th listen, something clicked, and I felt this jolt of recognition so strong it made me gasp out loud. The detective asked if I was okay, and I told him I needed to hear it one more time, but the 5th listen confirmed it, and I knew with complete certainty whose voice was under that distortion. It was Russell Crowe, or more specifically someone doing a Russell Crowe impression, and I knew this because I'd spent 3 months last year perfecting my own Russell Crowe voice. The kidnapper wasn't using electronic distortion primarily, they were doing a voice impression and then adding distortion on top to mask it further, and what I did next changed everything. The rest of the story is linked below or on my channel.